Now this here is a depiction of the city of Jerusalem after the time of Christ. How do I know that? Okay. Jerusalem in the time of Christ had two walls. The first wall and the second wall. The third wall was added by the grandson of King Herod the Great in the year 44 AD after Jesus had already had descended to heaven. Meaning in the time of Christ, the third wall did not exist yet. Earlier we entered the city and we passed that. Now the Bible says when Jesus went to the pool, to the Bet Hesda pool, he entered through one of the gates, right? And the gate is called Sheep Gate. In the time of Christ, there were 12 gates that led to the old city of Jerusalem. Today, there are only 8. Meaning, that's already an indication that Jerusalem had changed. So far, so clear?
Yeah.
We came and we visited the pool of Bethesda. Right now, we are standing at the Antonia Fortress, or what was the Antonia Fortress. The Antonia Fortress was the home of King Herod the Great. Okay? It was the home of King Herod the Great, and he lived here with his favorite wife. He had 9 wives. His favorite and the wife that he loved the most was from Jewish dynasty, which was from Jewish descent. Her name was Maryam. But even though he loved her the most, that didn't spare her life. Eventually he had her strangled to death. That was King Herod the Great. He was a sick man. We'll be speaking more about King Herod the Great on the 4th day. Not today, not tomorrow, but the 4th day. Eventually, after he had died, his kingdom was split into 4 separate kingdoms, and one of his sons, his name was Archelaus. He was the one that inherited Judea. The capital of Judea back then was, of course, Jerusalem. But 10 years later, after he had inherited his kingdom, his father's kingdom, he failed in preserving the peace in the city of Jerusalem. And Herod Archelaus, he was, of course, he was replaced with Roman governors like Felix and Pontius Pilate. But they didn't live here. Felix and Pontius Pilate did not live here. They lived at a city, a port city called Caesarea Maritima. We're going to be heading there on Monday. We're going to be passing by. It's a beautiful city, or at least it was a beautiful city. And it was beside the Mediterranean Sea. It was the main city, and it became the capital of Judea after King Herod the Great had died. So far, is it clear? But the Bible states that Pontius Pilate was in Jerusalem. So why, if that's the case, why did I say that Pontius Pilate lived there if he came here?
Yeah.
Every time there was a Jewish pilgrimage to the city of Jerusalem, the Roman governors would come and stay at Jerusalem. Why? Because hundreds of thousands of Jews would flock to the city of Jerusalem and become pilgrims and head to the temple. In order to preserve the peace, the Roman prefect would come here and preserve the peace. And he would bring with him a huge army to preserve the peace. The Antonia Fortress, or at least what was the Antonia Fortress, according to the 1st century Roman historian and Jewish historian, writes that the Antonia Fortress could fit 50,000 soldiers. And this is the place where Jesus was brought to Pontius Pilate. And this is where he was condemned to death. Is that our group? No. And this is where he was condemned to death. But before the condemnation of Christ, this is the place where he suffered. And this is the place, ladies and gentlemen, where they scourged him using whips, but also a kind of whip, which is called the flagellator. A flagellator is like a whip, but at the ends of it, it does not have lashes. Rather, it has pieces of broken metal, sharp metal.
Yeah.
And only a talented soldier can use that on a person. Why? Because if a person doesn't know what he's doing, he can kill a person very quickly. Here, they didn't want to kill Jesus quickly. They wanted to torment him. And they used it over and over again. So before the condemnation of Christ, he was already half dead. You should know this. Yes, crucifixion was the sort of execution or the sort of punishment for a person who was considered to be a rebel, a murderer, a thief. But it was not supposed to bring death quickly to a person. It was supposed to bring a very slow death to a person. Usually it would take 2 to 3 days. And how did a person die from crucifixion? He would lose lots of blood, so much that he could no longer take a breath and breathe oxygen. Because There was no longer any circulation to the heart. And eventually the person would die from suffocation. And this is very important because the Bible says 3 hours after the crucifixion, Christ was already dead. Why is that? Because he was already tortured here. He was already half dead. And usually, crucifixion was a method of execution that was supposed to bring shame to the victim before death, during death, and after death. Before death, a person was sentenced, and he had to carry the beam of the cross. Did you pay attention to what I say? He had to carry what? The beam of the, not the cross. The beam of the cross. The cross was heavy. It had to carry that person's body weight. Let's say that a person like me, okay? I'm not going to tell you how much I weigh, okay? But I weigh a lot, okay? So you can't bring a 20-kilogram cross to carry me. You can't bring a 30-kilogram cross to carry me.